Hey everyone, thank you for joining me for episode 11 of The Green Life. Today's guest is amazing Maria Marlowe, and Maria is a woman on a mission. Maria is a holistic health coach who is focused on helping women clear their skin, fix the digestive issues, lose weight, feel and look amazing. Maria left her career in finance and became a holistic health coach, nutritionist, and chef, and now puts all these tools that she's learned about in a beautiful package on her new website, Glow by Marlowe. Maria is also the author of The Real Food Grocery Guide and Be Healthy Everyday Planner, which are two books which, in my opinion, really go well together to help women find control their health, find what makes them feel better, and really keep track of it, but also learn how to shop and what to eat. Maria is an amazing and inspiring resource that everybody should really know about, and she really brought this together because she struggled with her own skin, thinking that she would never get rid of acne after all the failures of over-the-counter drugs and doctor appointments. She realized that medicine is in our kitchens, and now she really puts into practice everything she learned in a way that is fun and delicious. I cannot wait for you to get all these golden nuggets Maria can share in this episode. Welcome, Maria Marlowe. Thank you so much for joining me today for The Green Life. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I really love your journey, and I really wanted to share what you've been doing because I love how you really worked with so many women to change their lives, really. We know we're going to talk about skincare mostly and how to have a glowing skin, but we know that the skin is such a powerful tool for us to either feel confident or not. So you have really given a lot of women the opportunity to feel themselves again. But before we dive into the skin subject, tell us a little bit about you and your journey, how you got here. I think you have such a colorful and wonderful, background. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, I never thought that this is what I would end up doing, but here I am. I think life gives us obstacles, which makes us stronger and then sometimes pushes us in a new direction. And that's definitely what happened to me. So when I was growing up, I lived in New York, had a standard American diet that was completely normal to me, as were all of the health problems that come with a standard American diet. And I had a lot of them. I had digestive issues. I was overweight. I had a variety of issues, but it was primarily the acne that bothered me the most. So I developed acne when I was about 16. It lasted through college, even though I was trying everything I could to clear it up. So I started with the drugstore stuff, then moved to Proactive, then moved to dermatologists. I did topical retinoids, I did antibiotics, birth control, spironolactone. You go through that whole roster of different pharmaceuticals and nothing was working. Long story short, when I was in college and I was initially actually studying fashion, then I moved into finance, but I had a friend who just casually mentioned to me over lunch that my skin problems maybe were due to what I was eating. And what I was eating for lunch that day was one, maybe two slices of pizza, a little mini box of Entenmann's chocolate chip cookies, and a can of soda. So she hit the nail on the head. But when she first said that to me, I was like, that's interesting because I've been to several dermatologists and not one of them ever asked me what I was eating. But I was desperate at this time. So I was like, okay, let me give it a try. I adopted an anti-inflammatory diet. And, the rest is history. My skin pretty much cleared up within about 3 months. I had to work on, repairing my gut health and rebalancing hormones and those sort of things. But I really did it primarily through food. And my skin cleared up, which is something no pill or potion was able to do in the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
So that is what got me on this nutrition rabbit hole. But even then I graduated with a degree in finance and went to work in the hedge fund industry. But I was still just obsessed with nutrition, and all of my free time was spent going to health food stores or reading books on health and watching documentaries. And so I went down this nutrition rabbit hole, and I eventually got to a point where I said, nobody is teaching us this. When I went to the doctor, they didn't tell me anything about food. Who's here to teach us about food? food impacts our skin so profoundly, and nobody's talking about this. So I went back to school to study cooking and nutrition, and the rest is history.
And that's amazing. I love that. And I do remember you did something in fashion as well, not just studying. You were actually working in fashion. Which side of it was it?
So I did a little bit of everything. I was originally going to school for the business of fashion, so fashion merchandising. But during that time, I got to work as a buyer in a store. I worked on fashion magazines in the editorial department and went on photo shoots. I was a stylist. Like held so many different positions in the fashion industry. I was always doing something.
That's amazing. And what was looking at these girls who from the outside obviously look perfect, like they have beautiful bodies, beautiful skin. I mean, we know that a lot of it is also makeup, but and a lot of your clients are probably models who just like, actually, I want to have a better skin. But what was the impression? Because I feel like there is also the disconnect where we look at magazines and think to have that skin, you have to be, brushed. You can't have it really, but well, actually you can. What was your first impression when you were into this industry and looking at these women that from the outside look perfect, and you were like, oh, I'm actually struggling with my skin. What was your first feeling?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say that like now I work with everyone. Most of my clients and customers are regular amazing women. But yes, the fashion industry, it's completely fake. And what has been interesting these past several years is it's no longer just the fashion industry and the magazines and the movies that are fake. It's social media as well, which kind of takes it to a whole new level. It's one thing for there to be some distant celebrity who has airbrushed skin in a magazine. And then it's another thing for your neighbor to have that airbrushed skin, right? And just seeing every single person in your feed filtered and airbrushed and fillers and all of this stuff, you start to forget what a normal human face looks like. And so then when you do look in the mirror and you see, oh, I have pores, or, oh, my skin is not like glass, then you start feeling bad about yourself. But meanwhile, your skin is probably normal. I mean, your skin is normal, right? So it's really distorted our perception or what we think and know normal skin is. So that I find actually disturbing, and it's something that I try to talk about quite a bit, because there is this pressure now, I feel, to look a certain way. And I just think that society is always trying to tell women what to do, what to look like, and it's all just a distraction, where we get obsessive over our looks when there's so many more important things that we can worry about. Of course, we want to look good and feel our best. Like that, I'm 100% on board with. But I just feel the preoccupation with it is distracting us from other more important things.
Yeah, I hear you. And I actually didn't think about it, but it's true. I saw a few people talking about it, including you, about these filters. And I must say I'm a little disconnected from it because I think I'm, for better or worse, because I'm a little bit older than most of my peers in this industry. I don't even know what a filter looks like. So I'm like, oh yeah, they use that. But I've seen a lot of people having this wonderful glowing skin. I'm like, hold on. And it's true. It's true. And in a way, I feel like it reflects their self-confidence as well, or lack of, because if you don't feel like you can show that your skin, it is what it is, then maybe you need to work on something else, a little bit deeper. So you're right, it is a bigger issue than just how we look. But in any case, the skin is important and it can make someone feel really good or really bad. So I completely empathize because I was put on a pill when I was 18. I didn't really have acne at the time, but I had some normal breakouts, which were dependent on my diet and my gut health. But I tried to stop at 23, and because I had been on that pill and because my diet didn't change, then it triggered an acne, like a bad acne on, especially on my chin, which is obviously hormonal. And I went to the dermatologist, and the first thing he gave me is, antibiotics. And he never asked me what I was eating, never said, you should stop dairy. It's like none of that. And it's fascinating how only years later I had to go back on the pill, by the way. He told me you have to be on the pill. And only years later at 31, when I actually did the same course, at IIN, I was like, I can't, I cannot physically even take it anymore. Like I can't take this pill anymore. And then by that time I had learned so much and changed my diet completely. I went plant-based and everything. I didn't have the acne I thought I was going to have if I stopped again. So there was that trauma, that fear that tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and my skin is going to be like polka dots. It's going to be like, and instead it didn't happen. And of course, as you said, there are other things that you have to do, like balancing your hormones, but food is such a powerful tool. So how did you, when you learned about food, when you learned about health coaching and nutrition and food, even you became a chef as well, what was your moment of saying, wow, this is just, look at what you can do with this food? And what was the food you never used before that really impacted you?
Oh, I mean, so many. I literally only ate packaged processed foods for the first 2 decades of my life. So if it didn't come out of a package, I didn't know what it was.
Mm.
So the foods that I think had the most profound impact on my health and my skin were for sure vegetables. I was not eating any fresh vegetables prior to that. So incorporating more fresh foods into my diet was a game changer. Turmeric became one of my favorite spices. I used to put that on everything because it has really potent anti-inflammatory properties. And acne is an inflammatory condition. Most chronic issues are inflammatory related or inflammation related. So reducing that chronic inflammation is really key to getting acne, other inflammatory skin conditions and other inflammatory conditions, in check. So that was a big one. Also flaxseed. I discovered flaxseed, crushed or milled flaxseed during this time because it's a great source of omega-3, plant-based omega-3s, and fiber as well. And I found that also really helped my skin. So I would say those are probably the three main foods that were big game changers for me.
Amazing. And you mentioned the connection to the gut health. So I guess your gut health also needed working on when you transitioned.
For sure. If someone has a skin problem, they most likely have a gut problem because the gut and the skin are very closely connected and intertwined. And in fact, now there is this term that you might have heard, the gut skin axis or the gut brain skin axis. And basically, it just talks to this connection of how our gut microbiome actually affects our skin and our skin microbiome. So there is research to suggest that if there is too much bad bacteria in the gut and not enough good bacteria, or even if there is increased intestinal permeability, so all of these are signs of gut dysbiosis, this is linked to a higher risk of acne. Whereas if you can get your gut microbiome in a healthy state, you can start to get your skin in check, because when your gut microbiome is healthy, there's less inflammation, you're digesting and absorbing your nutrients better, you are more regular, right? Constipation can also be a cause or trigger of acne, right? So once your digestive system is flowing properly and working properly, you'll generally find that your skin improves as well.
Makes a lot of sense. If you don't detox from your digestive tissue, then your next big thing is your skin, right?
Yeah.
And have you noticed, and if you, with your diet, with your program, that other things can also be helped, such as eczema or psoriasis?
For sure, because these are all also inflammatory conditions. Whenever there's redness or bumps, right, those are signs of inflammation, and generally including more anti-inflammatory foods are going to be helpful. Now, there are some differences. So it's not going to be the same exact protocol, but there are some things in general. For example, the anti-inflammatory diet, removing the pro-inflammatory foods like dairy, which you mentioned, sugar and refined carbohydrates. Those are across the board going to be really helpful. also goes back to the gut. Repairing gut is really, really important as well. I think a clear skin diet or healthy skin diet is also a healthy diet overall. So one of the benefits of adopting these habits to clear skin is generally that other areas of your health improve as well. And that's why I always say that acne or eczema, psoriasis, whatever your ailment is, it's actually a blessing in disguise, because it's alerting you of that inflammation and that imbalance within. And when it's on our skin, I know it sucks because you almost wish that, okay, if I have to have some condition, at least let it be internal so nobody else has to see it. But it's actually better because you see it, you want to do something about it. So you're more likely to make that change. And then also we know that acne is a sign of inflammation. But if you have chronic inflammation, that could also trigger other more serious issues down the line. So again, it's really a blessing because it's prompting us to take charge, look at our diet, look at our lifestyle, and make some changes so that we, improve our health for the long run, not just our skin.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And so let's go a little bit into your protocols. Actually, let's talk about when someone comes to you with skin conditions and they're like, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I need to do something about it. What's your first approach? How do you go about it? And how do you do, how do you take them through the food that they're having and really talk about the things that they need to eliminate because they're not beneficial for them and what they need to add in?
So everyone is different, and there are many different root causes of acne. So the first step really is to understand what the individual person's root causes of acne are, right? Because we could both be breaking out, but something completely different could be triggering it for both of us. So first, we want to dig into the diet and lifestyle that you currently have and look for any potential triggers. So that's really step one. Then we can kind of identify, okay, these are the 3, 5, however many areas that we want to focus on and work on and dig a little bit deeper into. So generally, after doing this for so many years, like almost a decade now, I find that there's generally 6 root causes of acne. So one, the primary cause is inflammation, chronic inflammation. And the 2 main sources of chronic inflammation in our lives are diet and stress. So inflammation is one, a lack of nutrients. And it may seem that in this day and age, we have such an abundance of food and access to food so readily, it seems like, it's impossible to be nutrient deficient. But of course, that's not the case. And there is quite a bit of data to show that people with acne tend to be more deficient in certain nutrients. So for example, vitamin A or zinc, vitamin D, omega-3, right? And you don't have to have all of these deficiencies. You could have just one. And that is what's causing the issue. And for many people, I have a lot of people who come to me and say, Maria, I already eat really healthy. So I don't think it's my diet. Like, what is it? But then when we look a little deeper, they're like literally missing one nutrient, and adding back that one nutrient is what they needed to clear their skin. So nutrients, figuring out any nutrient deficiencies and replenishing those. Repairing digestion, that is for sure a big part of any skin protocol, as we make sure that we're removing any food intolerances that may be exacerbating gut issues. And we want to make sure that we're balancing that gut microbiome, getting plenty of good bacteria in there, getting rid of the bad bacteria, decreasing the bad bacteria, letting the good bacteria kind of keep the bad bacteria in check. We also want to rebalance the hormones. And I think with hormonal, like when it comes to hormones, people don't realize how much their diet and their lifestyle impact their hormones. I think sometimes, and I know this was me, before I really learned and studied all this stuff, like if the doctor were to tell me, oh, you have a hormone imbalance, you have too many androgens, too many male hormones, I would think, oh, there's just something wrong with me, right? Like, because they're not telling me anything else. And I'm just thinking, okay, I have some imbalance. I'm broken in some way. But in fact, it was the foods that I was eating that was causing this increase in hormones. So, there's a lot that food can do to rebalance your hormones. And for anyone listening who has PMS, right? Or breaks out around, not even just breaks out, but any sort of PMS symptoms, that could be a sign that it's a good time to look at your diet to help bring your hormones into balance, because things are definitely imbalanced. You don't have to break out or be in pain every single month for the rest of your life just because you're a woman. PMS is not part of being a woman, which is another thing. I used to think that you have to take Midol every 30 days when you get your period. It's just what women do, right? Because you just get PMS, you get pain. But actually, no. If you get your body in balance, your gut in balance, your hormones in balance, your nutrition up to standard, you will have your period and not feel a thing, and you won't break out, right? So it's looking at the factors of the diet and lifestyle. So that could be too much sugar, that definitely wreaks havoc on our hormones. Not enough fiber, that's a really common problem for a lot of people. Sometimes I'll see women who are just over exercising, doing so much HIIT and intense and running and marathons and all of this stuff, and their hormones are in disarray. And it's because you might actually be doing too much, right? There's also plastics and pollution and all these endocrine disrupting chemicals. So we're in contact with so many things that can disrupt our hormones. And that's why it's important to kind of look at all aspects and see what we can do, what's in our control that we can, help bring back into balance. Another aspect that we work on is stress. That is a huge, huge piece of the acne puzzle, because stress creates inflammation. It also increases our stress hormone cortisol, and excess hormones like cortisol tend to increase our oil production. And when we have excess oil on our skin, it tends to clog, we tend to break out. So stress is a big one. And then finally, the sixth area that I like to focus on is skincare. Because what a lot of people don't realize is sometimes the skincare they're using is not necessarily causing acne, but it's prolonging it and kind of exacerbating it. Anything that's leaving your skin red and raw and more angry looking is probably not a good idea. Even flaking off, I think that there is this tendency or this idea that the harsher the better, because we want to peel our skin off. We just want to get it off. There's bad bacteria on there, right? So we're just kind of scrub everything away. But actually, if you allow food and diet to do the really heavy lifting here, you just need gentle skincare. And I'm talking very gentle soap and water, maybe some tea tree oil, maybe a light moisturizer. You can use different plant oils. I love jojoba oil. That's all you really need. You don't need these peels and the chemicals and all this harsh stuff, because your body from the inside is going to start reducing the inflammation and start balancing your hormones, so you're not producing as much oil, and that's what's going to clear your skin ultimately.
Absolutely. And you mentioned actually something about bacteria. We tend to forget that our skin, just like our gut, can have good and bad bacteria. And with everything that people keep on using, especially with the pandemic, everyone is just using disinfectant over disinfectant over disinfectant. We are killing the good bacteria in our skin. And that can definitely also be too harsh, and then unbalances also the moisture in our skin, which creates another set of problems. So, you're right. The harshest, we are into this society that thinks the harsher the better, to clean. But bacteria is not necessarily dirty. It's just, it can be very helpful, right?
Exactly. And that's a big piece of the puzzle, which I'm glad that you brought up. Prior to the 1980s, it was believed that acne was caused by quote unquote bad bacteria. And since the 1980s, or starting in the 1980s, research has started to show us that actually bacteria is not the problem, it's inflammation. So by the early 2010s, I want to say 2012, 2013, acne was actually reclassified from an infection, a bacterial infection, to an inflammatory condition. And now this is a really huge paradigm shift in our understanding of what's causing acne. And as a result, this should have led to a paradigm shift in how we treat acne, but it hasn't. We're still treating acne like it's 1980 using antibiotics and isotretinoin. And it turns out that this P. acnes bacteria, which has been renamed C. acnes bacteria, it's actually a commensal bacteria. So it's a good bacteria and it's present on even healthy skin. So people that don't have acne have this bacteria on their skin. There's also been research to show that this bacteria is not always in acne lesions. Sometimes it's there, but sometimes it's not there, which is again showing that this is not the cause. This bacteria is not the cause of acne. We don't know exactly the role of it. And there's some really interesting new science out there, like on the cutting edge, that's trying to kind of figure it out. But bacteria is not the trigger for acne. So I feel like bacteria is sort of the baby that got thrown out with the bathwater. And, when antibiotics came into use in the 50s and 60s, we started trying to use antibiotics for acne. And actually, the first antibiotic that they used didn't work for acne. So they tried other antibiotics, and then certain classes of antibiotics started working. So they started using that. But it turns out, in retrospect, antibiotics also have an anti-inflammatory property. And so the reason that they may have been working is primarily their anti-inflammatory benefits, not so much their antibacterial. And the paradox with using antibiotics to treat acne, is that when you take antibiotics, they don't just target one bacteria. They work on all bacteria, including the ones in your gut, including the ones even in your vaginal microbiome, right? That's why yeast infections, for example, are common when you're on long-term antibiotics. And because of this disruption of the gut, which is long-lasting, by the way, research has shown after even a short course of antibiotics, the gut microbiota is changed. Several strains are completely wiped out. Others, can take a very, very long time to get back to normal levels. And so the paradox is, when you take antibiotics to treat acne, even if they do clear it up while you're on antibiotics, when you eventually get off, many people experience that the acne comes back, and often with a vengeance, because now you also have some gut troubles to tend to. So that's why I feel like I try to talk about this as much as I can. Our gut health, a healthy gut, is so important for healthy skin, and taking antibiotics to address an inflammatory condition is not a smart idea. If acne was caused by a bacteria, I could understand why antibiotics would use. And I do understand historically why they were used, right? Because we used to think it was a bacterial infection. But now, however, we've had this information that acne is caused by inflammation for 40 years. So to continue to use antibiotics, which pose so many risks, not just to the person taking them, but really to society at large because of the growing threat of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, I think it's really bad, and I think it's wrong. And I think that it's something that really needs to change, and more people need to know about, because if you go to the dermatologist and they prescribe you something, most people are going to take it. I mean, I always used to take everything that my doctor prescribed, because I just didn't think to do more research or didn't know any better. But now, knowing what I know, and I'm not saying like you can never take pharmaceuticals or anything like that, but I think for acne in particular, antibiotics are not the right answer.
Yeah, I hear you. And I had exactly that sequence of events. First approach was antibiotic, finished, came back. And then he said, you have to go on the pill. It's clearly hormonal. And instead of saying, let's fix your hormones, it's like, let's just, cover up your hormones. And exactly what you said, actually, I had too much androgens, and it was due to diet. And it always is the same. So it's like a playbook. And I mean, I don't want to be a negative person about maybe doctors. The pharmaceutical companies are not changing because it's very profitable to give antibiotics, sadly. I know they're trying to be less free giving about it. Like I know, in the UK, at least when I lived there, at the beginning, I remember anything, even a cold, they would give you antibiotics, which doesn't work. And now they're much more careful, because they did notice that they had these super bugs coming up where people, like, they didn't respond to any antibiotics, and that was because they were giving too much antibiotics to people in the UK. So they're like, okay, we need to stop. This is not helping. But this is not just the UK. This is a global issue. And you're right. So why give something that we know for sure doesn't work? And then we go at the root cause. But is that everybody's still looking for the silver pill when it comes to things. And this is going really down a rabbit hole, because you're like, okay, if I have to fix my skin and I can't take medicine, then I have to change my diet. Well, that means that whatever they're selling in the store maybe is not good for us. And what they put the food in is not good for us. What we cook our food in is not good for us. And then we're going to start really peeling back all these things. And you said, even having nutritional deficiencies. Well, the fact that organic food is not freely available everywhere, and that's the food that contains most nutrients. The rest struggle to give us enough for our daily need, or even have the nutrients, because of where and how they're grown. So it really brings up such a big topic. How, actually, talking about organics, how is organic for you when you talk to your clients? How important is it to bring in?
I think that any vegetables are better than no vegetables. But that said, I definitely am a huge proponent of organic for many reasons. One being, if we're talking about hormonal imbalance and gut imbalance, some of these pesticides and agricultural chemicals that are sprayed on our crops are damaging to the gut, and they're also endocrine disruptors. So they are not really doing our body any good, right? In that regard, it's also not great for the environment. And I think that instinctively, like, if we want to go in a more natural direction, then organic farming is for sure the way to go. We are exposed to so many chemicals. Many of us live in big cities, right? So there's chemicals that we cannot avoid. They're in the air. There's air pollution. When you go out to a restaurant, they're burning scented candles, or they're spraying that room spray, and people next to you at work wearing perfume, right? There are chemicals and endocrine disrupting chemicals everywhere. So we don't have control over that. But when we're home, we do have control over what we choose to buy, what we choose to eat. And so I feel like any steps that we can take, that is ideal, but not to obsess about the other stuff, because you'll just drive yourself crazy, and you don't need to. I mean, the body is quite resilient. And I feel if you really fuel it as best as you can with good, nourishing food, and also nourishing thoughts, right? Reducing your stress, your body will be strong enough to handle, all this kind of outside stuff. But that said, in terms of access to organic, there are a few things that I think make it a little bit more accessible. So number one, first off, if we're looking at all the different types of produce, there is a list called the Dirty Dozen list and the Clean 15. So this is put out by the Environmental Working Group. It's a nonpartisan group that examines, I think, like 100 different types of produce every year, and ranks them in order of which tend to have the highest pesticides versus the least. So anything on the Dirty Dozen is high in pesticides. So those I would try to always buy organic, ideally. The ones on the Clean 15 list tend to have low pesticides anyway. So if you can't find them, or your budget doesn't allow, these are totally great choices to even buy conventional. So that's number one. Number two would be to buy frozen. Frozen fruits and vegetables are typically just as nutritious, as if not more nutritious than the fresh stuff, because they are picked at their peak ripeness, which is also their peak nutrition. Then they're flash frozen, which locks in a lot of that nutrition. And when we compare that to like the fresh stuff, let's say that's at your grocery store, that's probably picked when it's underripe so that it can go through weeks of transport and storage. And so once a fruit or vegetable is picked, its nutrition actually starts to decline. So you may actually find that the frozen organic blueberries, which are probably 30% cheaper than the fresh ones, may even be more nutritious. So frozen food is a good choice. And then if you have a local farmer's market, I would definitely go check that out. Sometimes you'll find farmers that are not necessarily certified organic because organic certification is very expensive, yet they grow their fruits and vegetables to organic standards. So that could be a good choice. So I think there's ways around everything. If there's a will, there's a way. So if you want to consume more organic, no matter what your constraints are, you can figure out some solutions that work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. There's the ways around it. Okay, so if let's talk about the food that you definitely are no, you should never have them. Not good for you. What are they?
Well, okay, I'll preface this by saying that, in the beginning, I had very strict sort of rules with myself with what I could eat and what I could not eat. Whereas now that my gut is healed and I'm, overall eating a really healthy diet, I'm definitely a bit more lenient. Like I'll eat French fries every once in a while, and French fries are definitely not healthy for you in any shape or form, but they're really tasty, right? So I'll say that these foods are not healthy, but if you eat them, it doesn't make you a bad person. There's nothing wrong with you. It is what it is. There are some truths that we have to, acknowledge, and that there are certain foods that are healthy for us, that, are anti-inflammatory, give us nutrients and help us thrive. And there's other foods that are nutrient deficient, that promote inflammation. And ultimately, when we consume them regularly, are going to zap our energy, zap our health, hurt our gut, hurt our hormones, hurt our skin. So with that said, sugar and refined carbohydrates are definitely number one. There's quite a bit of research on the negative impact of refined sugar on our health and definitely our skin. So in fact, sugar, like a high glycemic diet, is one of the most well-established acne triggers. And in fact, even the American Academy of Dermatology acknowledges a high glycemic diet has been linked to increased incidence of acne. And when you start to consume a more low glycemic diet, one in which you keep your blood sugar stable. So this would be made up of whole fruits and vegetables, whole grains, any sort of whole foods, and getting rid of that processed refined stuff that spikes our blood sugar, that actually leads to a reduction in acne. So if you want clear skin, if you want more energy, if you want a better mood, if you want a better mental function, definitely reducing or eliminating refined sugar and refined carbohydrates is number one. And I'll also just throw out, this doesn't mean the sugar in fruit is bad. This doesn't mean like you shouldn't eat sweet potatoes or anything like that. I'm talking about refined sugar. I'm not talking about, natural whole foods. So that's number one. Number two, if we're talking about skin, the second really big one that there is a lot of data, and I'm talking huge studies with thousands of people, tens of thousands of people even, that suggest that dairy is a acne trigger. So if you are struggling with acne or any sort of inflammatory skin condition and you consume dairy, I can almost guarantee you that if you remove the dairy, your skin will probably improve. There may be other factors that you need to work on as well, but that is likely a key factor. So I would say those are kind of the two big ones. And actually the third big one would be vegetable oils. So refined vegetable oils like corn, soy, canola oil, these are high in omega-6 fatty acids, very low in omega-3. And these oils have been found to promote inflammation. And of course, inflammation is the cause or the spark of acne. So we want to reduce those kinds of oils. Now, again, you're never going to be able to eliminate them completely unless you decide to just eat home for the rest of your life, which most people are not going to do. I don't do that. So I know when I go out to a restaurant, I do try to choose restaurants like Mediterranean restaurants where they'll use olive oil, which is a healthier oil. I try to go to those, as often as possible, but I don't, it's not all the time. And I just know like, okay, I'm going out to, dinner once or twice a week at a place that I'm going to have vegetable oils. It's not a big deal. I don't even think about it. As long as at home, I'm only using healthy oils. So I don't have any vegetable oils at home. I only have the olive oil and some unrefined avocado oil. Sometimes I use unrefined coconut oil, and that's it. So yeah, I would say if in terms of foods to avoid, those would be the top three.
Okay, brilliant. And the ones to definitely have in your cabinet, I think you're going to say turmeric.
Turmeric's a favorites. Dark leafy greens. I love dark leafy greens like arugula, chard, kale. There's so many different ones. And greens are nature's multivitamin. They're rich in abundance of nutrients. They're a good source of fiber. They have chlorophyll, right? There's so much goodness in greens. So I definitely would say adding greens and rotate them. So you don't have to eat the same thing every day or every week. Rotate them. There's so much variety. Secondly, orange foods like sweet potatoes, carrots, different types of winter squashes. Orange foods are going to be a source of beta carotene, which is the precursor to vitamin A. And vitamin A is a very common deficiency amongst people with acne. So when I had really bad acne, I got into this habit of drinking carrot juice and eating more carrots and sweet potatoes. And I think it really helped me personally. So I always encourage people to include more orange foods. So green foods, orange foods. I mean, of course, you want to eat the whole rainbow, but I feel like sometimes having those specific colors to focus on helps. And any foods with omega-3. I think on a whole, a lot of people are deficient in omega-3 because the two primary food groups that contain omega-3 would be certain types of fatty fish, like wild salmon, for example, anchovies, that kind of stuff. And then seeds like flaxseed, chia seed, etc. And so a lot of people don't eat fish. And a lot of people don't eat seeds on a regular basis. So if you're not really eating these, it's possible to be omega-3 deficient. And so making sure that you're conscious about including, like if you're on a vegan diet, making sure you're having a variety of chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, all these omega-3 rich foods. Maybe you want to even supplement as well. It's really, really super duper important.
Absolutely. In fact, I love how Dr. Furman talks about G bombs, and even when he talks about the seeds and nuts, it's like I put nuts in there because I think they're healthy, but it's mostly seeds, and it is because they do kind of unlock a lot more nutrients when it comes to essential fatty acid than even the nuts. Although things like walnuts, of course, are brilliant, but you're right. People don't tend to eat as many seeds as we should implement easily, in our breakfast or smoothies even, because I guess they don't have that taste and crunch as nuts would do, right? So people tend to navigate towards nuts a lot more, but obviously they are much more superior in nutrition and also better controlling calories, because with nuts you can easily finish a bag of cashews or any nuts. They're so good and crunchy. So yeah, it's a little more dangerous. What about things like nut butters? So there's this concept that, well, if I have fatty foods, will my skin get worse? So obviously, if you are now, okay, I'm not going to have vegetable oils, but I'm going to have my nut butters. How do you feel about nut butters like peanut butter or cashew, almond butter?
I think nuts and nut butters are totally fine because the issue is not necessarily fat. The issue with vegetable oils is a specific type of fat, which is those omega-6 fats. And nuts do contain omega-6 fats as well, but they also contain fiber. They can contain other nutrients, right? So it's different than an oil, because the oil, basically, you're only getting the fat, whereas a whole food, you're getting so much more than that, right? And it's different when you digest that. They both cause different a different chain of events in your body afterwards. So I think nuts and nut butters are totally fine. I think with anything, you don't want to overdo it, but that's not like, if someone has skin problems, like that wouldn't be something that would raise a red flag for me initially. I think there would be other things that would be have more red flags, before we tried to tweak and see, okay, is this an issue? I mean, of course, food intolerances are also contribute to any sort of inflammatory skin condition like acne. And you can have a food intolerance to just about anything. And so, yeah, there's common food intolerances like dairy and gluten, but then, some people may have an intolerance to avocado or to these random foods that you're just like, how can anyone have an intolerance? But they can. And so if you do have an intolerance, you'll want to remove that food for a period of time while you work on healing and repairing your gut. And once your gut's in a good place, very likely you'll be able to add that food back in and not have any issues with it. So you want to also look for food intolerances that can be kind of like a sneaky potential cause of acne or inflammatory skin issues.
Makes sense. Delayed food allergies. People don't think about it. It's true. What about what do you see now that you moved to Dubai and you left New York? Do you see a difference in because of the food being different? Do you see a difference in people's skin? Do you feel like in Europe and Middle East, do you have better skin than in the US? What was your what did you notice?
Well, I think just like in America, here a lot of people have acne and have skin issues because here, especially, people love to eat out. So, I mean, some people eat out, even they do this in New York, they eat out every night, or at least most nights of the week. So you're definitely getting a heavy dose of vegetable oils. And we don't always know what's in our food when we're eating at a restaurant. A lot of times they'll add ingredients that we have no idea, like sugars or wheat or whatever it may be, to make that food taste really, really good. But we don't have control over those ingredients. So I think, equally, I've actually been doing some research on this to try and see the global acne rates, and acne is on the rise globally. Interestingly, in my research, prior to the 1950s, there were a number of places where acne was actually non-existent. So, for example, in Canada, amongst the Inuit Eskimos, in 1946, there was a health survey, and acne was basically non-existent. And then fast forward a few years later, because of what was going on in the time after the Cold War, that area that they lived in became a strategic region for the government. And the Inuits were basically forced to assimilate into Western culture and move into Western camps, eat Western food. And in a very short period of time, their chronic health issues all skyrocketed, including acne, including cavities, heart disease, diabetes, all these things skyrocketed because they were no longer eating their normal traditional diet, which included, berries and greens and things they were foraging and wild game and wild seafood. Now, and seaweed, now they were eating sugar, basically sugar and refined carbohydrates. And as a result, their acne rates increased. We also saw this in Japan. We've seen this in Paraguay. Like, we've seen this all over the world, that when cultures that are eating a nutrient dense whole food diet, generally their incidence of acne is low or zero, like as in nobody gets acne, not teenagers, not adults, nobody. And then when they're introduced into Western culture and they assimilate into Western culture and Western eating habits, their rate of acne basically matches that of America, which is, by the way, 85 to 90% of teenagers get acne, and 40 to 50% of adults struggle with acne. And as an adult, you can have acne for decades. And even as a teen, the average time that a teen has acne is 5 to 10 years, which is not a short time.
No, and this actually segues to my next question. So for teenagers, because I guess a lot of I don't know if this is true, correct me, but the clients that come to you might be early 20s upwards, because now they're obviously financially independent also, and they can pay for their choice of care, and sometimes parents don't necessarily know how to deal with a teenage acne, or they think, well, it's normal because they're teenagers and their hormones are just changing. This is even more so for teenage boys, but I've noticed that it's happening more and more from 12 years old now instead of 16, 15, 16. So obviously, as their puberty age decreases or becomes a little bit earlier, they seem to have skin issues a little bit earlier. But I believe, and this is the case, I think probably you'll too, but I believe that if they were approaching this just like your older clients that are coming to you directly would do, we probably would see a massive improvement, which I think would help the teenagers balance their hormones easier so that they sometimes don't act out because of what's happening in their body. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, well, first off, the crazy thing is that the age of the start of acne is getting younger and younger. So you mentioned 12, it could be 9, it could be 7 years old. There's cases of children having acne these days. And it is also in line with the fact that the age of puberty is also getting younger and younger. And so, yes, acne is not a part of human life in the sense that like puberty is a part of human life. Every baby that is born, that makes it to the teenage years, they're going to go through puberty, right? That is a part of life. Death is a part of life. But acne is not a normal part of life in the sense that just because you're born, you have to get acne. So I think that's like, a big point to drive home, because I think a lot of people think like, oh, you get acne when you're a teenager. It's just what happens. It happens when there's inflammation and imbalance. And most of the food that a lot of young people are eating, and I know this because I used to eat this food as well. It's a lot of packaged processed foods. It's a lot of sugar. It's a lot of refined carbohydrates. And so it's not really surprising then that, they're experiencing these issues at such a high rate, because they're basically consuming, the foods that create that perfect storm to create acne inside. So of course, during puberty, hormones are going to fluctuate and change, but that doesn't mean that you have to have acne. And it's the same thing with women around their period, right? During our cycle, our hormones fluctuate, and many women tend to break out right before their period as a result of those fluctuations, but you don't have to break out just because of those fluctuations, right? If you can bring your body into balance, your gut and your hormones into balance, even though your hormones will be fluctuating as a result of, or because of your menstrual period, it doesn't mean that you're going to break out. So I would say, yeah, even teens that are struggling with acne, focusing on more anti-inflammatory foods, reducing those refined carbohydrates, making sure you're getting enough nutrients. There's definitely nutrient deficiencies, especially if you have a picky eater. That could be more common. I would say it's anytime you have acne, you have to look within. Acne is not a topical issue. It is an internal one.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, not that acne is beautiful, but beautifully said. It is right. Like, it's from within. Do you feel what other practices do you feel are really helpful to connect to? Now we have nutrition down, and you mentioned stress management. What other practices you feel like people really benefit from when they start this journey? And connecting to the fact that you said it's from within, there might be triggers that perhaps are not food related. What is your approach with those?
Yeah, food is really, really, really important and makes a big impact, but it's not the only thing. And I think it's easy for us to kind of grasp and change. Working on reducing our stress or dealing with old trauma is a much bigger task than adding turmeric to your dinner. So in terms of the other stuff beyond food, definitely stress management. And that can take many different forms, whether that's meditation, yoga, breath work. We're all different. So what works for us is going to be different, but you definitely need to add some sort of practice that's going to bring your stress level down a notch, because your body can't heal if it's in a constant state of fight or flight. And if you're constantly stressed, And I know this because I used to be one of these people. Sometimes, especially again in big cities, we feel like we can handle the stress. Like, even though we're really stressed, we're like, okay, well, I'm handling it. It's okay. I like it. You kind of thrive on it in a way, up until a point. But what's going on underneath the surface is that our hormones are in disarray, our cortisol levels are high. And when that's happening, it just sets off this chain of events that you're not going to be happy about, right? Like, for example, causing your skin to produce more oil, which is then going to clog your pores and increase your chance of getting acne. It's eventually going to zap your energy, and you're going to need to rely on caffeine or other outside sources just to get through the day. It can cause weight gain. It can cause so metabolic disorders, right? So there's so many issues with having this chronic stress. So that is something that we need to get under control. And I like these outside things like meditation, yoga to lower stress. But what I also tell people is we need to change our mindset and our perspective on stress. Like, what do we let stress us out? Because sometimes we get to a point where everything stresses us. And that comes down to like how we're viewing the world. And I think there's a book called Loving What Is by Byron Katie. I don't know if you've read this book.
No.
But it's an amazing book, and it helps you just reframe the way that you look at stressors in your life. And she talks about how there's no such thing as a life without stressors, things that cause stress, whether it's bills, bosses, babies, all these stressors, right? But what is different is how we react to those stressors. Do we let something, like, if we use an example of two people have a new sports car, and they both get it like a dent or a scratch on it. One person is going to go ballistic. You can see their blood pressure rising, their skin getting red, screaming, yelling, like really upset. And then the other person, the same thing happens, the same stressor, but they're just like, oh, whatever, it's a car, I'll get it fixed.
Yeah.
That's just the event is the same, but it's the reaction that's different. And it's the reaction that's going to determine your particular stress level. So learning to master your mind and not let your mind, your mind stress you out more than it needs to. Or we all do this at some point, but like really learning to master your thoughts and understand that you're in control and you're in control of your reaction. I think that's really, for me personally, that has been the most pivotal thing in reducing my stress, because now my stress load is a lot lower to begin with.
Amazing. I think we're gonna have to put this book into the show notes. If you don't mind sending me the title. Yes. Okay, we're gonna do one last. We're gonna end with a myth busting about skincare. I think you mentioned at the beginning you like things like jojoba oil, and I love to. By the way, I really, well, I make my own skincare. I'm at that point, but I love oils. And I remember previously people saying, yeah, but if you have oily skin, an oil can make your skin worse. What's your take on that?
I think that's a big misconception. Well, two things. First, oily skin is a state. It's not a type of skin. So even if your skin is producing a lot of oil now, that's not like that's probably just what you're eating and doing that's causing that excess sebum, right? We talked about so many different things that can cause excess sebum. So that's number one. And then number two, certain oils may clog your pores, but other oils won't. So jojoba oil has a chemical makeup very similar to sebum, and it's actually very gentle on our skin and soothing, and it won't clog pores. So it's non-comedogenic. And I think, I have in the past done oil cleansing and things like that, which I think is fine. But I personally, the way I like to use oil now is as a moisturizer. At night, I like to put it on. And I find that it's really just soothing to my skin. I also use it as a makeup remover. There are certain oils like borage oil, which is really high in gamma-linoleic acid, which has been found to be helpful for the skin barrier, restoring skin barrier. So yeah, that's the idea that oils are not good for oily skin is a myth.
Yeah, I thought so. I'm glad we didn't rehearse that before, so I was like, I'm going on a limb here, but I'm happy you got the same memo. Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. It's not we're giving types, to people. Like, your skin is oily, your skin is dry. Actually, your skin is reflecting something else. It's a state of the moment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, we could talk about skin forever. There's so many things, and I know we only have an hour, but I really appreciate the time you took for me. I'm really happy that we got to share this, and I will put all your details in the show notes. But before we go, what's next for Maria or for Glow by Marlowe? What do you have on store? I mean, you have amazing programs on there. Anything new coming up?
Yes. So, well, right now I have something called the Clear Skin Plan, which walks you through that whole protocol that I mentioned earlier. So you can figure out your root causes and then remedy it with food and lifestyle changes. So that has been amazing. I've had thousands of people do it. Like the before and afters are insane. People who thought they would never clear their skin is clear. And so it's amazing PDF. I actually have it here. It's like thick. There's hundreds of like over 100 recipes. So I'm turning that into an app. So that I'm really excited about. So that's coming out in September, but the Clear Skin Plan is still around. And lots of fun things in the pipeline, but the app is probably the biggest one right now.
That's fantastic. And I only learned today that you have a podcast as well. So I'm going to have to start listening. I'm so happy that I found it. And I saw that you were interviewing Dr. B. So that's awesome.
Love Dr. B.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Maria. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I love your journey. I always follow you and see what you're up to, and I'm very inspired by the things that you share. And I think you just live and the life that you preach, and that's the most important thing. That's authenticity that I really look for when I work with anybody, and when I even interview my speakers, because I try to really take from what you're teaching and apply it, and I find it so beautiful to have that motivation. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for staying for this episode. I hope you got so much out of it, just like I did. I find it so inspiring to learn how to look after our skin in a natural way, but mostly from within. So I'm really excited that we did this. And if you liked the episode, as always, please do rate it, share it, like it. Make sure that you give us a boost to grow our community. So I'll see you next time. Bye.